Well, welcome everyone. I'm here with Ben Thomas, 2020 Sportswriter of the Year out of Alabama. Just a little backstory on Ben before we get into the interview, because he's here for a reason. He's not here so I can explain his career. He's here so he can explain it for you. But he currently covers high school sports in the mobile area for the Alabama Media Group. And he has worked at various media outlets across the state of Alabama for the last 30 years. His work has been seen across countless publications, including The Guardian, the Washington Times, Discover Magazine, and more. So an incredible career. And congratulations for winning Sports Writer of the Year, Ben. That's very awesome.
Hey, I appreciate it. It's been an honor. I appreciate the agency and the association and everybody that, it's an honor voted on by your peers. Really, that makes it even more humbling. And just, for a high school guy, it's a reward for me just to cover high schools, but then to receive an honor like this is certainly been humbling, and I appreciate everything about it.
Right. And we appreciate you for being here and taking the time to speak on it too, because especially for like young people like me that may want to get into the industry and progress in the industry, hearing like you speak on your experience and covering high school sports, and like I could go on for an hour naming the publications you've been featured in. Like that's important stuff for influential young people like me trying to break in. So thank you again for that as well. So the first question I have is, what was your career path on your way to your current position? So you obviously are incredibly accomplished and you've been working for the last 30 years, but what was it like getting to the position you're in now? And how was your trajectory in your career? Was it linear? Was there up and downs? How did you get where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I think every time you say 30 years, I think, man, am I that old? But I guess I am that old. It's been pretty straight. I mean, I guess it's been a little bit up and down, I guess. I mean, nothing bad, but I'm from Georgia originally, Stone Mountain area. I went to Auburn University, and I have been kind of well traveled up and down the state. I mean, I haven't quickly quit jobs and accepted others, but I've been different places. I started my career in Gadsden, Alabama, which is in the north part of Alabama, at the Gadsden Times. I also obviously had 2 stints there. I worked with great Hall of Famer named Jimmy Smothers, who was sports editor at the Gadsden Times for like 40 years, and I owe him a lot. He's passed on now, and I miss him dearly. But he taught me a lot about the business. He taught me, how much to have. I think one thing he taught me was to have pride in anything you do, which I kind of always knew. But sometimes in this business, Sahil, you may write a 40-inch story or you may write a 5-inch brief, but have pride in both of them just the same, because most of the time they have your name on it. And second of all, you want to do a good job. So have your name is out there. So, and your publications is out there. So always have pride in what you do and have good work ethic. This is an industry where a lot of times you're working long hours, you're working weird hours, a lot at night, on the weekends, whatever. So, have good work ethic and be a good organizer. And so I was there with Jimmy and a great staff at the Gadsden Times, and it was a smaller paper where you kind of learned everything. And I had the ability to cover not just high schools. Like, I haven't totally been a high school guy all my life, but I covered colleges, Auburn and Alabama, went to the World Series a couple of times, covered Andre Agassi in some tennis tournaments. So I kind of got that in my first job. I kind of got that experience of, wow, this is great. You get to do a lot of things. And that really helped me later on. And I'll explain that. I went from Gadsden to the Montgomery Advertiser in Montgomery, Alabama. Went there as assistant sports editor under Ken Rogers. I was there for 8 years. Ken left and I became sports editor for the last couple of years there. We had a really great staff, guys you've probably heard of: J.G. Tate, Josh Moon, Tom Enzi, a lot of guys in the business who still do a great job today. Were there. Laurie Dan is another one. She's in Texas now. We did a lot of good coverage on high schools and colleges. But God kind of led me to Mobile after that. I was kind of getting a little bit burned out, to be honest with you, Seal. I was working a lot of hours, kind of married to my job. Didn't have much of a personal life, and it was time for a change. And I was able to come down here, work for the Mobile Press Register as a copy. I came down here as a copy editor, just a regular sports copy editor under Randy Kennedy, which kind of let me kind of depress, get back to feeling okay about myself. And then after a couple of years, the industry changed, our business changed. We went to more of a online model, 3-day-a-week newspaper, Unfortunately, a lot of people were let go at that time. Uh, Fortunately for me, I was not one of them. I was kept, and they said, you know what, we have a job for you, but it's going to be covering high schools. And this was about 8 years ago, Phil. And to me, that was great because I'd done it before. I'd been to Jordan Hare Stadium and Bryant Denny Stadium. I knew what that was like. So I'm an older guy covering high schools, but because of the experiences I've had in the past, um, I love doing it. I know that most of those. The great thing about covering high school sports is most of those schools want you. They love to see you when you come up. They want to see you. They want to
Right.
help you. Um, for colleges, unfortunately now it's kind of more of a you need them more than they need you type thing, and
Yeah.
sometimes that makes it. It's not that it wasn't that way when I came into the business, but it's kind of
Especially
developed that
covering,
way.
like you said, like such big schools like Auburn, Alabama, that get national coverage like all like 24/7 essentially,
Yeah.
especially like in Alabama. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and they have so many people that cover them, like you
right.
said, in the state and in the college. We have for AL.com, we have three people based in Tuscaloosa and two based in Auburn. So, but I like high schools, and I think what I like most about it is the impact you can have on those young people. You and I, we're always going to impact people negatively or positively. I hope my impact is positive, and they certainly impacted me in a positive way. So that's kind of where I am. Like I said, I've loved this job. Our staff, unfortunately, our high school staff has decreased since I took this job. But all along the way, there's been blessings about it, and I'm still blessed to do it today.
That's amazing. That's really good to hear too, because you mentioned like you covered Andre Agassi, you covered the World Series, college sports teams. So you don't kind of stay in the same place in your career, which is a good thing to hear for a lot of younger people because you know a lot of like young professionals or people who want to get into this industry or any industry, they kind of want to dip their toes in a little bit of everything to see what they really like because you're not really sure what you are gonna like yet, or so doing a bunch of those things is good. And I'm just curious because you said because you started that with that and you transitioned to high school. um how has the transition been with COVID covering high school sports? Because that must have been another transition for you. That was
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Well, I mean, like everybody, whatever you're doing, whatever job you have to alter your thinking. For me, there was two things. One, my boss, Josh Bean, who was with me on the high school beat. He was technically my boss, but we were kind of partners basically. He left and took a PR job. So he was, he left the business right before COVID hit. So for me, I was like, man, how am I going to cover all that? Well, then COVID hit. So that changed everything. But again, because of what I do, I was still able. I never had a dull moment. I mean, I have every coach's number in the state. I did a lot of recruiting coverage. I would call coaches and say, "Hey, can you patch me into this number one recruit? I want to do a story on him." And obviously, I'm covering COVID. This is when sports aren't even going on, Sahil. So during the
Right.
summer, so I had plenty of stuff to write. Whereas if you're covering Auburn or Alabama or whoever, you're basically waiting for them to have a Zoom call with Coach Saban or whatever. They don't
Right.
have that luxury. So I was blessed again in that regard. And then football wise, Alabama started high school football on time. I mean, there was some criticism there, but they started on time. And I think the thinking was, we're going to play when we can because we don't know how long we're going to be able to play. It turned out they played 15 games. They
Right.
got to the state. Not everybody did, but
Right.
they did get to the state championship, and everything was different. The championships were different, but that's just part of it. You know, Steve Savarese, who's our executive director, said the other day, everything's going to be different except for one thing, and that's the game. And really, at the high school level, that's the most important, to give these kids, let them play their games.
That's very true. Yeah. And so that kind of ties into my next question. You kind of mentioned a little bit. And that was kind of like your favorite part of your job currently. And obviously right now is covering high school sports. And you said your impact that you can have on the students, which is very true. Um, can you talk a little bit more about that and how you can impact the students? And is that your favorite part of the job right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what God has called me to do right now in my life for sure, and not just, it goes both ways. I mean, it's not just me impacting them; a lot of them have impacted me as well, and the coaches as well. And I think my favorite part of the job is just developing those relationships, because you can't really do that on the college or pro level. You can't get close to athletes, and you don't always want to be close to the story. You got to use, you got to say the truth if the truth is out there. But for me, yeah, it's just being able to get to know those guys, to help them along the way if I can. Um, if they're deserving and that type thing. And I think that's, if God calls us to do something in each day of our lives, and sometimes we don't know what it is, but for me, I believe I can see a distinct reason why God has put me in this place, and that time is up, He'll lead me somewhere else. But until He does, I'm going to continue to try and have a positive impact on people around me, not just athletes, but the people I work with and the people I work for and anybody I come in contact with. That's
That's
important to me.
that's amazing. Yeah, that's because when you're talking about, I could kind of tell that you really did enjoy that part of your job. So I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that. So, what is the best piece of advice you can give someone pursuing a career in sports media? Because you mentioned one thing earlier that caught my attention. You mentioned like giving your 100% into everything, because it has your name on it, which is very true. Everything you write has your name on it. Would that be your biggest piece of advice? And if so, expand on it. But like, what else would you say to a young professional trying to get into the sports media industry?
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, that's the first lesson I learned, and now it's even more prevalent because when I started, you really just had the newspaper, so really only the people in your town were reading it. Now, whatever I write's could go to China or it could go anywhere. People could read it. So, and believe me, if you make a mistake, they'll let you hear about it. You'll get emails. So be careful with that. But I think now in the sports media business, the biggest piece of advice is to be flexible, to not be afraid to try new things. It's not like when I grew up where you just had the newspaper and your deadline was 11 p.m. or 12 p.m. or whatever. Be flexible. Be willing to try new things. Don't be afraid to adapt, because we're in a world of adapting and a career of adapting. And 8 years ago when the Newhouse Company and Alabama Media Group went into the system we're currently in, it wasn't the same as it is now. I mean, everything's changed. It really changes year to year, and you just got to be able to adapt by that and not be afraid of it. I mean, like I said, it's you just got to be let the Lord lead you, and not be afraid to do what you need to do, because people are going to read the news, Sahil. I mean, they want to find the news, and they're going to find it. You just got to make sure you're reaching out to the right ways to find it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, definitely does. And just to piggyback off of one of your points, because you've been in the industry for a long time, and you mentioned how it's changed, right? And it's gotten a lot more digital centric, and it's always evolving. Like, technology is always evolving. Um, how how did you adjust, and how do you constantly um, keep up with the constant like changes in technology and stuff like that? Because I've grown up with technology my entire life, and when the pandemic hit, I never even heard or knew how to start a Zoom call.
Oh,
And it took me 2 weeks to get adjusted. And I've lived with technology my entire life, so I know how challenging it could be as someone who's always had technology in front of me. So like when you first got into the industry, technology wasn't as prevalent. How do you constantly stay, well versed in tech and with the new apps and softwares and stuff like that, websites that come out? How do you stay on top of everything?
well, I'm probably not as versed as I should be. You're being generous to say we were. When I started, cell phones were just now coming into existence. So, I mean, we've come a long way from that. But, our company does a good job of keeping us updated and giving us the materials we need to use. And basically, my materials are my computer and an iPhone. I mean, that's what I use. We have a great video team based in Birmingham that does great work. And but that's my materials. You need a phone and you need a computer, and you work anywhere. I mean, I've worked at my house since March. We may never go back to the office. I don't know what that holds, but
Right.
there's no different effect for me other than what I think you lose is the camaraderie of being around your coworkers and your friends at the office. For me, that was always important, and I miss that dearly. But I'm here on my back porch right now, and I'll be here probably the rest of the day, and I'll be able to do my work with no hiccups, assuming the internet doesn't go out or something.
Right.
So, a lot of people are more advanced technologically than me, I'm sure, but you just got to be, you need to obviously have a good company that keeps you informed on what's going on. And we try different things as a company. Whether I don't think anybody knew what Zoom was before March. I don't think you're the only one.
Yeah.
but we try new things. We're not afraid to try new things. We have great people working for us, and I'm just kind of a cog in that wheel, I guess you'd say. I'm by far not the most technologically savvy guy in the world. I'm kind of just trying to be organized and go from there.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, like no one really knew what Zoom was, but it's like always with these technologies, it's like, I feel like I'm someone who should be on top of it because it's always been a part of my life. Like I was born in 1999, and around 2004, 2005, 2006, like cell phones started to become really prevalent. So it's always been in the forefront of me, but like, adjusting to being like taking classes online and stuff like that, like that's an adjustment period. So I can't even imagine how it's like when you're working in a field for, a decade and a half, 2 decades, and then having to transition over. That must have been something really incredible to be a part of and witness.
Well, just
But
to
yeah,
just to transition from a daily paper basically
exactly. Yeah.
to worldwide internet. I mean, that's the transition we've made over the last 30 years. Although we still have a daily paper, thankfully, I'm thankful for that. I love a daily paper.
Right.
Our company has a 3-day-a-week paper, but I appreciate that we still have good people working on that. But yeah, that whole change is 30 years ago when I got into it. You could have never seen it coming, I don't think.
Exactly. And it's crazy to hear it like you said it, but that is true. Like we really went from paper to the World Wide Web, which is an incredibly drastic change. And you mentioned earlier, one of your points that stuck with me from when you answered one of the questions earlier is you mentioned like now you would write something and you would get instant response via email from people like responding to what you wrote. That must be different too, because I'm sure that's always been a thing, but it would be at least a little more delayed. I'm sure there would be less responses, and it would be via phone call, I'm sure, rather than like instantly over the internet. And that must have been a change in your work as well, because you're probably thinking like everything I say now is maybe seen as a microscope, and anyone can comment on it, really.
Yeah, it's good and bad. I mean, it's bad when everybody gets criticism. It's good when somebody or in your past life sees, hey, I know that guy. I'm going to click on, because you can click on obviously your byline and it sends the email to me. When I was totally different from when I was sports editor in Montgomery Advertiser, whereas if we had a mistake in the newspaper, I would come in the next morning, and the little light on my phone would be blinking, and I would pick it up and say, you have 40 messages, and I would know that, we left out the Alabama story or whatever happened. So totally different, but it's also a way to connect with the people. Certainly this year we've needed a way to connect with people. And I think email's been good for that. So I'm always glad I try to respond to all those people. I try, and most of them, most people, they think they want to be mad at you, but if you respond nicely, most of them are accepting of that, and you can talk it out, whatever it is. So it's part of it, but it's a fun part.
Nice. Awesome. Well, congratulations again for winning Sports Writer of the Year out of Alabama. That's incredible. And thank you again for joining this interview. I think a lot of people are gonna gain a lot of knowledge, especially people around my age or getting into the industry are going to find this very, very useful. So thank you again for that. And yeah, if you want to say anything else before we stop this interview, go ahead. But other than that, I just want to say thank you and appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, man. It's always good. Let me know if I can do anything to help you. And again, very appreciative for this award and just so humbled by it. And I'm going to keep doing what I do, and I don't do it for awards. As I've explained, but it's always nice to get them. So
Right.
I appreciate that. It's very humbling.
Right. Thank you, Ben.
All right. Thank you.